It's such good advice. And I think even just like fear is a limiter. Like, especially when you're talking about, and you've helped me with this over the years, is back injuries. Like, with something like that, there can be just a lot of injury anxiety and fear. Welcome to the Hollyfield Nutrition Podcast. I'm your host, Holly Samuel, and I'm a registered dietitian, board certified in sports nutrition. I'm a certified personal trainer, and I have my master's in health education focusing in eating disorders. And on the Hollyfield Nutrition Podcast, we provide you with the nutrition knowledge for all things running, endurance sports, preventing injury, burnout, and more. I'll interview everyday runners and athletes making it happen just like you, along with various professionals and experts in the nutrition space. We'll chat about experiences as a runner, how nutrition and fueling impacts training, performance, and your overall health, and of course, adjustments you can make to be the best runner and healthiest version of yourself that you can be. Let's get into the episode. Kim, welcome back to the podcast. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too, Holly. Thank you.
Thanks for coming on and chatting with me post marathon after beating me up for a couple months. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I'm glad that you're recovering mostly well.
Mostly well, except for
Yeah.
child slides that have got me good. But yeah, I'm excited to chat about this topic. You're so immersed in this topic. I am a part of your Train Like a Master group that we'll talk about, and I get to interact with the awesome athletes that you coach who are masters athletes. So I'm really excited to talk about this. I feel like it's a good subject that doesn't get enough coverage.
Yeah, no, me too. And I love everything that you do, Holly, and I love that you also have shown an interest in this age group, even though it's not your own. So I appreciate that because it's not an easy time in a woman's life. So we need people like you that can help navigate, that aspect of it. So thank you.
I have gathered that it is not easy. But
No.
no, I appreciate that. I mean, I am a huge proponent, of course, of like find a practitioner who you're comfortable with. And sometimes that means finding the practitioner who you relate to because they've been through what you've been through. But I also don't think we need to have had a heart attack to be a cardiac surgeon, if that makes sense, to be a good, practitioner. And selfishly, I hope to be a master's athlete one day. So I also just really try to learn as much about it as I possibly can to help my clients, which I'd say at least half of my clients are over 40. And selfishly for myself one day,
Yes.
because I
The
don't
more you know
think,
now, it's going to be an easier transition when you are finally there. So it is very smart.
yeah, that's the hope. I mean, I've always found it super interesting. So yeah, I appreciate that. But just to kind of get started, you've been on the podcast before. It's still like my top 5 most listened to episodes. And
That's
it's the cross training episode. I actually saw on my walk this morning, since I'm not running right now, post marathon, a guy on an elliptigo like zoomed past me, and I've never seen one in Durham before. So I was like, friend,
wow.
where are you going? Come back.
I don't know who that was. I feel like I
Yeah.
know all of the riders in New England, but I don't know who that was.
I don't know who it was either. Maybe he's from a different town and he just got here like on a really far ride. But you did the cross training episode previously. So if people have interest in that, we'll probably refer back to it a couple times on this
Sure.
episode. But remind everyone who you are, where you're located, and what you do besides coach me through the Boston
Yeah.
Marathon.
Yeah. I mean, so I was just drawn to this sport of running from a really young age, which I've always, looking back on it now as an adult, I think that's kind of funny to like distance running. And then, did the competitive running through high school, college, and beyond, basically just whatever age group I'm in, I'm in it. I keep competing and like haven't fallen out of love with just doing my best wherever I am in life. I'm 45 now. And then when I was 37, I decided to turn that love into a career, which is amazing because then I get to work with people who love running maybe as much as I do. I mean, it's close. I might like it a little more than them, but working with a lot of people who also love the same sport that I love, which is just amazing and so rewarding. And so that kind of started with working with, injury prone athletes because that was my background. And so that became my interest. And I just really immersed myself in that research. And then I was getting curious about working with masters women. So a few years ago, I kind of posed this question. I mean, I remember even talking to you about it and being like, do I know enough? And talking to a couple of my other friends and colleagues and wanting to start a group, but just being really worried that I didn't know enough to lead a group of women. And I just wanted to create a community um, where people could connect and like learn about what it means to train as a master's athlete, feel successful, like still perform well, whether that's age related or maybe still hitting PRs. And you guys were like, you know enough, Kim, you're ready. But I think like that question of, do I know enough? It just still sits with me. And it's a good thing to sit with because I'm not like I'm not stale. I am always like, what else can I learn here? Because there always is new information. And I just want to like know as much as I can so I can empower all the women that I am currently working with. So yeah, I did start that group
You
thanks
did.
to you and some other friends that were like, yes, you should do this. But I'm never going to let go of this idea that I need to keep learning so that I can teach my group as much as possible. And like by bringing in you into the group, that has allowed us to have even deeper conversations about labs and hormones and nutrition and how the heck to get enough protein, because that's just not easy to do. Um, so yes, so that's my where I'm at right now. I also just still work with injury prone runners. I work with some one-on-ones. I see runners in person here in my home. I live outside of Amherst, Massachusetts. So but yes, that's kind of my background and how I ended up right here.
I was say the Boston Marathon lore is strong with the picture behind you.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah, no, thank goodness you started the group. I think the people who ask that question, do I know enough, are the ones that do know enough and absolutely should be probably, gracing us with that information and their knowledge. But like you said, you've worked with enough people to know that you never will know enough. So we need to keep learning all the time.
Always,
Um,
always keep learning.
yeah, and I think with this particular group too, I don't think anyone knows enough. Like we just don't have much research on athletic people over 40. Whether it's male, female, across the spectrum there. So I think the people who want to keep learning about it and who want to keep interacting with people in like a close one-on-one or group, setting, you probably learn so much from your athletes and it triggers you to go look into things to help them. And then you can help more people that way. That's at least what I found too, is working with masters athletes.
Absolutely. And I'll even say to them, because we do a weekly learning topic that I'll post on Sunday or Monday. What do you guys want to learn about? And it's not what they tell me is not always my interest. I'm like,
Mhm.
that doesn't interest me that much, but okay.
Yeah.
And because four other people will chime in and say that's interesting to me too. And then because it's like we have a big range of ages too, we've got people who are maybe just before perimenopause to perimenopausal to postmenopausal. So they're all learning from each other. And I love when because most of the women in the group are not postmenopausal, but I love when they chime in and walk everybody through like their own experience too. So there's just a lot of like community feeling there and kind of lifting everybody up and saying, this is what worked for me and this is what worked for me. And it's been really helpful for the group. And even just the like humor aspect of it, the
Mhm.
humor part is so important. Laugh about it or cry,
Yeah. Yep.
or a
Yep.
little bit of both.
Laugh while you cry.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know. I think one of my first like remarks too is like this group is so interactive. They're so engaged, which is not always the case. So, yeah, I think the community aspect of that is so cool, especially because you might be going through some of these things in your life, but maybe all of your friends and family members are not athletes. So, like, they don't have quite the same perspective as you. So, being able to be in a group that a lot of people are coming from like similar-ish, athletic backgrounds or trying to accomplish similar things with being so active, I think is really priceless because that doesn't really exist in a lot of places that I've found at least.
Even just saying the words like perimenopause and menopause out loud, in a lot of families is not acceptable.
Yeah.
So having a space, and I still find myself with that own shyness, when I
Yeah.
talk about it on Instagram, and I think I like get a little bit red
Mhm.
if I
Yeah.
say the words like perimenopause or menopause. There's still for me even this little bit of like, oh, I can't believe I just said that.
Yeah, I know. It's like talking about puberty, except it's like
Yeah,
we're decades older now, so we shouldn't be shy about this anymore, but we still are because it's
yeah.
like a taboo subject for whatever reason.
Definitely.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. So, I mean, just to kind of define masters athlete, like how would you consider that? Because I know that we've thrown around that term already a bit.
I mean, if we're showing up at a race, then it's like a very clear cutoff. It's you turned 40 and you are now a master's athlete. But I think that the changes that we are kind of focusing on are don't happen overnight. They don't happen at a birthday. And some people are going to go through some of those changes earlier. I mean, sarcopenia, which is age-related muscle loss, does start to happen at about age 35. So in my master's group, I do call it like a 40 plus group, but I also have some older 30s in my group, late 30s. And I actually kind of love when women come to me in their late 30s because they're just trying to get all their ducks in a row. They're trying to work on all of these little details so that once they enter their 40s and 50s and 60s, once they enter perimenopause and then menopause, they are doing everything they can that's in their control to be their best. So yeah, it's 40, but I am very happy to work with women in their, mid to late 30s and say, yes, you you are also a master's athlete.
Yeah. Yeah, or you can at least start to train like one or
Right.
yeah, start to train like you're going to become one soon. Or they come to you in their late 20s like I did. Just super
Yes.
ahead of the curve. Yeah. Like help, please help me. Yeah, it's true though. Yeah,
It
I
is
think
true. I do
yeah.
work with other athletes too. It's not only the 40 plus crowd. I have younger athletes as well.
Yeah, no, you work with across the age spectrum, but it's true. Like even if you look at the Boston Marathon that just happened, it's like, yeah, Des Linden's a masters athlete on paper, and so are so many other people that are such different athletes than her, who are in wave one, wave two, wave three, wave four, across the whole time spectrum. So yeah, I think it's a really broad category. And the point we're driving home is that you don't just like wake up one day and be like, I now feel like a master's athlete. On paper, you might be competing in a division waking
Right.
up one day, but these changes don't happen overnight.
No, they don't. I mean, for some women, they can feel like it. It can
Yeah.
feel like everything that I just did, all of the training that used to work, doesn't work, and I just gained 15 pounds in a week. So really for some people, it can feel like something happened overnight. And it's really hard to be in that. When you're in it and you haven't worked on all of the things before, it can be a very stressful time to try to figure it out. So yeah, it's always better to work on it kind of like before you start to notice a lot of changes.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of those like ducks that we can get in a row that we're kind of throwing around. So when it comes to the clients you work with, the research you've looked at, and just your own experiences too, being officially in the master's category, um, I would say the faster master's category. Like, what are some of the symptoms or changes that people report to you or that you've experienced?
One of the big complaints is weight gain.
Mhm.
I think that one bothers my runners the most. It's
I
the
agree.
one thing, yeah, that they have the hardest time coping with. And then there's increased fatigue and managing a sort of a different balance of recovery to training. Um, that they just aren't responding to their training the same way. That they're getting more frequent injuries and like random pains that they've never had before seem to pop up overnight. Lots of waking up in the middle of the night. And that's again, get this cycle of not recovering, kind of plays into that. Um, those are probably the ones that are complained about the most. But yeah, I'd say the weight and just even if it's just a little bit of weight, but but your body changes because it's like not holding on to as much muscle mass, so it looks even different, but it's only a few pounds, but you're kind of like not really loving the way that looks on you. That one is the one I hear the most.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think that's what tends to instigate people to come see me, like in my practice, is that. And then they'll also say, yeah, and the fatigue and the recovery and the
Yeah,
sleep and all of that. But like I was kind of okay enough with that, or I was gaslighting myself into believing it wasn't real. And then the body composition changes that can sometimes feel like they're really quick. I tend to hear about that really often
yeah,
too. Which makes sense as to why it would be upsetting. It's like I think
definitely.
yeah, I think change is hard, no matter what it is, but when it's your body composition and you're someone who's used to being very in tune with your body and maybe someone who is trying to still embrace the idea of, like, having a good body image, who maybe that wasn't the norm for, it can really kind of, yeah, be triggering, for a lot of people. And I know one of the things you mentioned that I hear all the time is like, I didn't really change anything, but then all this happened, which I think is like the most maddening part of this process. So, what I tend to find with people is they'll kind of just try to react to that. They'll kind of just try to do everything they've been doing like harder. Like they'll eat less and do less carbohydrates and they'll exercise more and do more mileage and just think, well, I must just have to try harder because that's what I've been used to doing my entire life thus far as an athlete. When that doesn't always work, it can backfire. So, tell us a little bit about, like, from a training perspective, how you approach this when it feels like I'm doing kind of the same things or maybe trying to do them harder, but it's no longer, I'm not responding the same way anymore.
I think that because I am coming from the injury prevention background, a lot of these concepts, they were actually the same. It's nuanced, there's some slight nuances, but um, like working as an injury prone athlete is going to look very similar to being a 40 plus athlete. So it's going to look like being more careful with your the introduction to speed work and then just how much speed work's actually on your calendar. So everything has to be done in the tiniest steps, really baby steps. I have found and I do this with my injury prone athletes too. I really like the 2 week on, 1 week deload schedule, which is a little different from the 3 weeks on, 1 week deload. And even in that deload week, I don't put a lot of intensity. Like I take out volume, but I'm also removing almost all intensity. So it's truly a week to focus more on your sleep, really have all of your training be recovery effort. Making sure that zone 2, I know zone 2 is like all over the
Tricky.
place, right? But
Yeah.
it's all over the place for a good reason. Um, zone 2 is probably the hardest zone to get right because a lot of people think zone 3 is zone 2. And I'm like, I can talk when I'm running, it's fine, and this doesn't feel hard. But, if you actually look at the data, it's like, well, it could be a lot easier. And then you would be accumulating less stress and fatigue if you actually got that right. Sometimes it also means like if someone's used to taking 1 day off a week, it might mean taking 2 days off a week or doing like one of those as just something like a walk even instead of a run. And then of course, the lifting. The lifting is super important. It's always important, really. Like when a 30 something runner comes to me or a 20 something runner comes to me, if they can perfect their lifting form at that age, it's going to be a lot easier to maintain those lifts when you do get into your 40s, 50s, and 60s. It's hard to start lifting routines when your body just doesn't move the same way that it did when you were younger. So to get it when you're young and then hold on to that good form because it is a neuromuscular thing too. Like once you learn it, it's kind of like riding a bike, then you know how to do it. So
Yeah.
lifting is really important for my master's athletes. They tend to do With them, I program like 2 harder lifts. So I like to say like working on heavy, just in quotes. And then we do a core routine, like an injury prevention, sort of like trunk focus routine as our third session.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much to dive into there. I feel like to start with the the stress load and like the speed work. I mean, you were so good about this even for me and just what I've learned being postpartum and breastfeeding and going through that big old hormonal change. um you approach training kind of similar. Like you have to accommodate for the life stressors and the physiological stressors that are there, and it's not like when we start to experience peri and postmenopause there's like magical pixie dust that gets, sprayed on you and it's like a different type of stress. It's still stress.
Yep.
It's reverse puberty essentially, where hormones are a little bit predictably unpredictable and then they bottom out. Whereas puberty is the opposite. There's not much, and then all of a sudden they're predictably unpredictable, and then we start cycling normally. So that's stressful on the body, and the lack of recovery, um, the life stressors that tend to be there for people in their 40s and beyond with families and aging parents and working full time and careers and all of that good stuff. It's really about, yeah, like managing your training load so that it's not too stressful. That's what I've learned a lot postpartum. And you were so great about that for me. Like we did 2 rest days training for a marathon where I didn't really do much besides walk on those rest days, walk and eat and sleep. And being really strategic about speed work so that you're getting what you're supposed to get out of it and not just trying to like force something in order to try and get
Get what you
results.
need and nothing more, you know,
Exactly.
don't push
Exactly.
it. Like a less is more in that situation. And I think also, um, you have to be flexible. Like this is not a time to follow your schedule without any flexibility. You
Yeah.
know, this is not a time to be rigid. And I do that's a big thing in working with masters athletes, like and trying to unravel that.
Yeah, it's hard.
Don't, I know what I wrote, and thank you so much for wanting to follow it to a T. But you need to see how you're feeling in that moment and decide maybe I should push this off to tomorrow, or maybe I'm gonna do an easy day even though it's supposed to be a harder day, and maybe I'm gonna do that harder day tomorrow, or maybe there's only gonna be one hard workout this week. Like it is not a time to practice rigidity.
Yeah. And you're always so great about that. I know like people have different coaching styles and like I think you probably tend to attract a similar type of client avatar like myself where it's like I don't really need someone to tell me to go for a run or to push me or to tell me I'm being a weakling or to just do it. Like I need someone to be like, no, Holly, take the rest day, or it's okay that you're not doing the speed workout, and that's actually going to support you more. And I think that is such an important component of coaching any type of athlete, but especially masters athletes who are used to doing things a certain way and used to being really rigid. um, it's really hard to do that because of their mindset and what we've been used to. And I say we because I know most of the athletes who are probably listening are like this. You like to follow a training plan. You like a routine. I think one of the things too, and I'm curious your opinion on this, I think one of the things too that makes it so hard in this sport is that you have a race on the calendar and that is a date and there is a timeline and it feels like a lot of pressure. So how do you help people navigate like putting together race schedules and making sure that yes, we're doing just what we need out of training, but that we're not also pushing the bill by putting way too many races on the calendar or having expectations that aren't reasonable?
Yeah, that one is hard because I still have some athletes where they're like, I'm racing this weekend and this weekend and this weekend and this weekend. And it's like, okay, but only one of those is going to actually be a race and the other ones are going to have to hold back.
Yeah.
Um, but I like to remind them that if you aren't willing to like rearrange your calendar and practice flexibility, you're not going to get to that race
Yeah.
at all. So, um, and then also just thinking about like what are going to be my life stressors during this particular time period. Like for a teacher,
Yeah.
maybe the best time to plan a race would be September, where you have the summer to train and you know that your workload is going to be light. So this I have really found that with stress in this age group, it doesn't go well. You can't have all the life stressors the way that maybe you got away with that when you were training in your 20s or 30s and you could still somehow manage to show up to that race. It's just not going to happen when you have like a teenager who is more important than you. It
Yeah.
needs you for whatever reason. So kind of looking at the calendar and then deciding what is going to be the least stressful time to actually have the training. The race itself, like for the teacher, could be in September, which is a stressful time, but you can work around that one day. What you can't do is work around longer training blocks, you know?
Yeah.
So figuring that out, the low stress, uh, kind of timeline stuff is really important. And then I think it can help to pick a couple of races and say, well, let's get this one on the calendar and this one, and sort of see how things fall and which one just seems to be coming together best, so that again, we're practicing flexibility and understanding that it's not going to be perfect. You know, we're just doing our best. And if you push with the stress levels like they are, we're not going to get to either race.
Yeah.
So the extra day off, you know, the taking the easier day. I am like the easiest coach, I think, because I'm always like, oh, just take an easy day. It's okay. But my runners also tend to not get as injured. So if I can keep them healthy and keep them consistent, that's way more important than that like on and off training that's like higher volume, no volume, high volume, no volume.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a similar approach with my athletes, which is one reason why I was so attracted to you as a coach is because I see it all the time. Like we can force high mileage or high volume for a period of time, but then if it all falls apart and we can't be consistent, it's like there's no point. Like it's about the consistency and what is going to make sense for your life stressors. And I also love the tip about just looking at the calendar like 2 to 3 months before the race and seeing what that's going to look like. And if that looks like a lot, then maybe we don't put peak marathon training on the calendar too that month. I think that is harder to do when you have more and more like commitments and responsibilities. And I think like the trend, which I don't think it's a bad trend, but it's a trend of like the marathon world majors and these really big races where you're entering a lottery, you're qualifying, you're getting a charity bib. It's a huge commitment to run and show up at this race. And you kind of like have to force it a little bit in order to make that day work in terms of your schedule. Whereas if you can do more local races or races where you can just sign up whenever you want, you can just kind of see how things go. And if they're going well, you sign up for the race closer to the race and not have this whole big, huge commitment that you've made like 2 years in advance.
I totally agree. I'm a big fan of more local, low-key marathons. And the marathon, it's such a hard event because you got this one day, and if it doesn't go as planned, then you really can't try again like you can for other races.
Mhm.
So having it be local, so that the plan really can change. It's easier to cancel a hotel
Yeah.
than it is to cancel a flight. And you've already probably paid way too much money to get into the race and all of those things. But if you keep it local, there's less stress involved and it's easier to change plans. And honestly, you're probably going to run faster because
Mhm.
you're not trying to get around all the crowds.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how that is not running Boston in the future. Like the
Yeah,
logistics of this are quite challenging, and
yeah,
I've
they
handled it
are.
well,
I mean,
but
it's fun. It's fun and it's worth it. But I
yeah.
think like you also need to get those low key races on the calendar because those are just all about you and your performance, and they're easier to manage for sure.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that. I think yeah, I just think it's a unique like thing that's hard. It's not like other sports where you have like a game every weekend. I think that has its own intensity because you kind of have to keep yourself in one piece, but for the training, it's like okay, it is banking on this one day that you trained for months for. So it feels like a lot of pressure, especially when you're flying or booking a hotel or you raised $10,000 for charity or whatever you had to do to get to the race. Um, segueing into strength training.
Mhm.
So I think most people listening to this have probably heard at some point that they should do it, that they should strength train if they are going through perimenopause, if they're over 40. Um, I really want to draw light on why we need to be doing this before then, like you've already alluded to, and also that there is no one perfect way to do it. I think lifting heavy weights is getting, rightfully so, a lot of press and attention. And that can be really intimidating and have people just quit before they even start if they've never done that before. So, how would you recommend someone who is a master's athlete who's trying to optimize their training start to think about strength training maybe a little bit differently than they have in the past, which might have been more, I'm doing this when I have time, running's my main thing. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you just said, that it can be a barrier to get started if you hear the word heavy, like the lift
Think of a
heavy
barbell.
shit. Yeah, is that's it's all over Instagram.
Mhm.
But I think we should redefine it, Holly. Are you willing to redefine it with me?
Of course, that's why you're
Okay,
here.
cool. Because I want to redefine it and say we are lifting to significant fatigue to or near failure.
Yeah.
The idea behind lifting heavy is about maximum muscle fiber recruitment. And like if we always lift moderate, and moderate can be a starting point. And when I say moderate, I'm talking about like maybe somebody's holding 20-pound dumbbells and they do 8. For most people, that's going to be a moderate lift, regardless of who you are. And you're going to recruit some of your muscle fibers. But if you always do a lift like that, you're going to recruit maybe 30%, maybe, of your muscle fibers. And then, like, what happens to all those other fibers that aren't getting used, right? You
Yeah.
use it or you lose it. So the idea behind heavy lifting is maximum muscle fiber recruitment, and we can get there in different ways. By really just focusing instead on the fatigue that you feel in the muscle. I like to say, like, go to a little bit burny.
Yeah.
When you feel that burniness in the muscle, that is actually when you have little blood flow, like you have a partial occlusion in the muscle, and that's the environment for muscle growth. So, blood's like being squeezed out of the muscle. So we can get similar results by doing low weight, high rep work or high weight, low rep work. As long as you're using the guide that you're following is significant fatigue. And I mean, I've played around with this because I have a tool here in my workspace where I can look at muscle oxygen, and I have looked at what the muscle looks like when I'm doing a heavy weight, like 80 to 85% of my 1 rep max, and doing 5 or 8 repetitions versus going to 30 repetitions with much less weight.
Mm.
The response in the muscle is the same. It takes a
Cool.
little longer to get there, but you can get there. And this is a safe approach for a lot of athletes. Like there truly are things that limit us from lifting heavy. Um, a lot of people don't have that weight on hand. Like maybe they don't go to a gym and they're lifting at home and they just don't have that weight on hand. Some people are limited by back injuries. Like even though they've done all the good strengthening exercises for their back, is just still a little something that they're managing. They might be managing like a disc injury, which truly once you get that, it is management and it's a long-term thing. And it can be flared up by lifting. And
Mhm.
so using a lighter weight, high rep approach would be more appropriate for that person. And then some people are limited by grip strength. I mean, grip strength is its own thing because that's like a longevity marker. So we should also be working on grip strength. But the bottom
Yeah.
line is that while you're working on grip strength, you still need to be lifting. So,
Right.
so we can get around it, by playing around with that more moderate weight, but not doing the 10 or 15 repetitions. Instead, go to 20, go to 20, test it, go to 25, go to 30, like see where you land with your fatigue.
That's such good advice. And I think even just like fear is a limiter. Like, especially when you're talking about, and you've helped me with this over the years, is back injuries. Like, with something like that, there can be just a lot of injury anxiety and fear, and that can inhibit muscle function. So, um, just having someone be really comfortable with the idea of, oh, I can pick up that weight that seems less scary to me and lift it a bunch of times until I achieve that feeling. I'm not already getting in my own way by looking at it like a trap bar or a barbell and being scared of it. And I think,
Absolutely.
of course, getting more comfortable with those things and having the guidance to do that can be really helpful so that you can go lift heavy weights and lift to significant fatigue with those heavy weights. because it does take a little bit more time, yeah, to do 40 reps than to do 3. But, I think yeah, I love that you talked about that, and I love that you just can see it black and white in the data that you've taken,
Yeah, it
with your
doesn't
animals.
lie. It doesn't lie. And I think like over time too, that you can start to trust your body, even if you are somebody who has had that back injury, that
Mhm.
I'm okay with 30 repetitions holding 60 pounds. And now I've been doing this for a few months and I'm starting to gain some trust,
Yeah.
and so, it's the baby steps that, again, that we were talking about before that help us make progress. And that's why I like to say like working on heavy
Yeah.
because we are working on it. It's even if you are somebody who's going to go more moderate, it doesn't mean that you're always going to stay at 60 pounds. Like
Yes.
we can still take our baby steps and increase weight and like see how the back feels and just gain trust over time.
Yeah, and recruiting the muscle fibers, more or as many as possible of them is, like you said, one reason why this type of mindset and approach to strength training is important. Like from a master's athlete perimenopause perspective, like metabolically, physiologically, what is that helping also do? Like what is strength training helping with in addition to making your muscles stronger?
Yeah. I mean, well, we are losing muscle fibers as we age, so this is just going to help us maintain our muscle mass. It's also good for bone density.
Mm.
There, I would love, maybe of a study. I would love to see a study where they looked at, because I know that this training approach helps with muscle mass, but I would love to see if there's a difference with bone density too. Like, could we go moderate weight, high rep, compare
Mhm.
it to high
There
weight,
might
low
be.
rep? Yeah, I want to see that study.
Yeah.
It might exist. But
Yeah,
that
I'll
would
have to
be
look.
really, yeah, yeah. If you find anything, let me know. I'll take a look around too. That would be really interesting because we do need to work on our bone density too. And so that's the one thing where I'm not 100% sure that if we are, going on the more lighter, moderate side, if we're hitting our bone density too. My suspicion is that we are, that the
Mhm.
results might not be exactly the same, but that I do think it still helps with bone density.
Yeah, because you're still weight bearing with more weight. You're still lifting the weight. It's just over a different distribution. So yeah, I
Right.
know that is interesting. I feel like it exists. We'll have to look for it and I'll report
Yes.
back.
Yes. It's a good question. It's one we should definitely explore.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I mean even metabolically, like maintaining muscle mass is so important to maintain basal metabolic rate, metabolism, being able to eat enough food and have it have a similar effect on you. I also know with like recruiting more muscle fibers that way can be very there are studies on this can be very beneficial for your blood sugar and lipid metabolism and those types of biomarkers too that tend to when women especially go through perimenopause and then eventually are postmenopausal and are not really producing estrogen progesterone as much anymore, they do tend to be a little bit more insulin resistant prone, because of the role estrogen can play in blood sugar metabolism, and this is one thing that can help basically replace what estrogen used to do for you, in addition to other types of intensity training and cardio that we'll talk about. So, yeah, super important. And also, yeah, redefine heavy, to have to be
yes.
more of
Yeah.
a
It's
feeling.
lifting to significant fatigue.
Yeah, which I've seen a lot on my training schedule before that exact
Yeah.
thing. So,
I do it too.
yeah,
Depending on where I am in my own, because I'm coming off of a bone injury myself right
yeah,
now. And so just for me right now, I'm feeling better for me, a more moderate weight is like 130,
mhm,
and I'm going to 10 to 15 reps instead of on that lower 5 to 8
mhm.
reps, range. And I'm just feeling more comfortable with that right now as I get back to training.
Mhm. Yeah, and like you said, it's you're modifying the weight so that you're not trying to force what heavy used to mean, and you're just redistributing the load a little bit, which is important for, like, a bone injury, I imagine, and
Yes.
the tissues that, yeah, like you said, don't get used as much when you're trying to heal from that.
Mhm.
I wanna talk about bone density and bone injuries and injuries in general. So, we talked a little bit about how masters athletes can be more prone to injury. Um, And you talked a little bit about like taking that deload week every third week instead of every fourth week, reducing volume if needed. Can we talk a little bit too about bone density and training approaches that allow you to be a little less injury prone or keep yourself in the green?
Yeah. Yeah, a bunch of the women in the Train Like a Master group have osteopenia or osteoporosis. And can we just take a second to complain that in the US, bone density scans are not recommended until age 65. So
Yeah.
your doctor, unless you fracture something, they're probably not going to make a recommendation. So that's something that like we need to take to our doctors if we have a suspicion that it should be looked at, which in my opinion, it should be looked at during perimenopause because lose most of the mass during menopause. So it's like we find out after the fact.
I know when it's
that we're
harder to do something about it.
Yeah, so okay, so I wanted to just make a complaint about that first, and also as a PSA, when you go to your doctor to bring this up and push it, push it. It's not an expensive test.
Yeah, if you've had a bone injury, if like a stress fracture, or you've easily broken bones that probably wouldn't have been broken otherwise in more acute accidents. If you ever had osteoporosis or osteopenia before, if you went through eating disorder treatment, I would argue cancer treatment, any hormone replacement treatment, if you just want to, any of those, I would say it's good grounds for a bone density scan, which is a DEXA scan. If you need to go ask your physician, and it is hard to get one sometimes, and you can go to third parties that offer them for cash and not insurance, and it is not terribly expensive. So it is something you can go do on your own too.
Yes.
Yeah,
I,
as you
I
know.
highly recommend that too.
Yes.
There actually was a super interesting study, and maybe you read this one too, that looked at women in their 60s who had been diagnosed with osteoporosis. And
Mhm.
then they split them into two groups, and one group they had them doing like more high intensity, high load
Oh yeah.
training. And then in the second group, it was some stretching, walking, light
What they
stuff.
recommend, swimming. Yeah.
Yeah, body weight. Yeah, because
Yeah.
one of the questions that, of course, researchers want to know is, could these women in the higher intensity group, can they do this safely? I mean, they have osteoporosis, they have osteopenia.
Hmm.
And just that group, that intensity group was, they had a lot of supervision.
Yeah.
But the answer was that they could do this without injury. And I mean, they did weed out anybody coming in that might already have an injury. So, I mean, there is that, but I thought it was really neat that these women that were in their 60s that have more brittle bones could do these exercises. So the exercises were really neat. It was just a few, 2 times per week, 30 minutes. They did a heavy back squat. They
Mhm.
did a heavy overhead press, and by heavy, they were saying 80 to 85% of 1 rep max. They did a deadlift. And the fourth exercise, if you follow me on Instagram, which I know you do, Holly, you've probably seen me do it because I'm kind of obsessed with it right now. And it said you jump up to a pull-up bar. This was their impact loading exercise, and then you drop
Yeah.
safely, but with impact. And I think that exercise is really neat because in terms of your bones, like you're jumping up, so it's like you're getting wrist, you're getting all your bones, and then when you drop, you're getting your spine, your femur, it's a full
All
body.
this
So
stuff.
I
Yeah.
love that exercise. And the women in that group, that higher intensity group, they did gain bone density during, it's an 8-month study, which was also interesting because there hasn't really been any research showing that once you have osteoporosis and you've gone through menopause, so your estrogen levels are low, that you can gain bone density back. And that one proved that you could. So
Yeah.
that was just another plug too for like lifting, I'm going to say with intensity.
Yep.
They did use a heavy protocol, which was 5 by 5 reps.
Yep.
But the idea is, of course, lifting with intensity, and that was just 2 times 30 per week, 30 minutes. So it wasn't a lot, but they had really good gains. And then there's another study that I read recently which I've been playing around with this protocol myself, coming off of a bone injury. And these researchers were looking at what the like ideal workload is for bone health. And they found that osteoblasts were active for the first 30 minutes of activity, and
Mm.
then they weren't. So like if you go out for a 60-minute run, you're
Mm.
active for 30 minutes and they're like the bone
Mm.
building cell. And then for the second 30
Cool.
minutes, you're continuing to accumulate fatigue, but osteoblasts aren't active. So it is more damaging for your bones. And I think this is an approach that a perimenopausal, menopausal athlete or a younger athlete who is managing a history of bone density issues or bone stress injuries can use, where you split your training AM, PM, or maybe like, I mean, I know I'm a bit privileged because I work from home, so I have flexibility, so I can get out twice a day. But maybe you can get out for lunch and then in the morning, or for lunch and then in the evening. So I just think that's like a really novel approach to managing bone health, even if it's not osteopenia, that it's just like for whatever reason I keep getting these stress fractures.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about bone density is that it's not more impact is better, it's less.
Mm.
Less impact is better. Like there was another study where it's just 3 by 10 sets of jump squats 3 times per week gained bone density. So I
Mm.
think like we have to think about it as we don't need a 30-minute plyo routine. We just need a
Yeah.
little bit of plyo a few times per week, especially in your 30s, like when you're trying to go into your 40s with as much bone density as possible. But yeah, a little bit is a lot better than more. And that's similar in this idea of splitting up your runs between AM and PM.
In that study, which is so cool, did it say at all like if there was a period of time you needed to have like off before the osteoblast would be active again? I'm
I
just
had that, I was out running and had that question in my head, and I thought I need to go back and see if they answered that. So I
yeah.
will look at it and I'll find out.
I'm curious. It's like, oh, because yeah, it's true. Because yeah, if you could like get your osteoblasts, which are bone builders, to be active twice a day instead of once a day, then that would be an interesting training approach that I bet a lot of people aren't thinking of, because a lot of people are probably thinking it's better to just go out and do, the 8 miles in the morning in one go to get time on feet versus doing like 4 and 4. Yeah, which can
Yeah,
be
that was just
effective.
that was a researcher in Boston,
Cool.
Dr. Tenaford. I don't know if you know him.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'll send you the study.
That's cool.
It is really interesting, and I'll also just take a look and see if they had the time suggestion for how much time to split.
Yeah. Well, because like, I mean, even I know you said, you work from home, you're flexible. Even when we were talking about this offline, like when I used to drive to my internship and spend 10 hours there, I would only have 40 minutes in the morning to do something. And then I did have like another 30, 40 at home, or at night. And I would split my day up like that too. And I was able to do more that way than I would have if I was like close-minded and trying to fit the whole hour in one go. So yeah, I know there's been other research on like what they call like exercise snacking, where you do a
Yeah.
little bit multiple times per day, which I know we've talked about before, and that can be beneficial for metabolism,
Yes.
and fitness gains too, and like just keeping your blood flow,
And that one is more like short bursts of high intensity. So you might
yeah,
do those jump squats that we were just talking about. That's a
yeah,
good one. Or to just hop on a spin bike and do like 6 by 30 second sprint. So it doesn't take long. It takes less than 10 minutes.
yep,
But yeah, also read that's good for metabolism.
yeah. Oh, so interesting. I love that. Yeah, I want more information on that.
I
So let
know.
me
I knew you
know.
were gonna like that. I was like,
I
oh,
like
I
that.
love this.
I know. I'm like, that sounds great. I like that approach. Yeah, I mean, I could keep talking to you about this for a long time. What else do you see in terms of training approach, or even just resources to point people in the direction, or mindset shifts to make, that you want to leave us with when it comes to training like a master?
Um, Start in your 30s.
Hmm.
Don't wait, which start with the general health guidelines because all of those become really important.
Yeah.
If you haven't mastered the general health guidelines in your 30s, then you're going to be a little bit more of a mess in your 40s, which are, it's like your sleep. Okay, if no one here smokes, I'm sure. Moderate exercise, so that's where we're talking about that balance again.
Mhm.
Um, Decreasing alcohol, like getting a handle on your mental health too, because with perimenopause and menopause, your stress levels, anxiety, depression, all of those things are really amplified. So
Yeah.
understanding that part of you when you're younger is going to help you cope with that when you're in your 40s. So if you can understand balance of all of these little nuanced, the nuances of training, recovery days, plyometrics, isometrics are super important too.
Mm.
Getting your heavy lift form in quotes, um, learning what type of cross training you like, because honestly, that should be on the schedule as a way to manage higher levels of fatigue, because generally the cross training is meant as like an active recovery day, but it's less impact than running. So just kind of like making all of those good choices. The earlier you start that process, then it's going to be a lot easier to transition to being a 40 plus athlete.
Yeah, I love that. On the buses to the Boston Marathon start line, I sat with like three masters athletes who kicked my ass. So, there's,
Pretty strong, yeah.
yeah, well, which is, I love that. Like, there's just, I'm like, oh, the future is bright. That's
Yeah,
great.
it really is. I mean,
I,
I just had one of my runners over the weekend. She thought, and she's in the Train Like a Master group, she thought like her PR days were behind her.
Mm,
And a year ago she thought that. And then she joined the group and she changed her mindset
yeah,
around balance of training and recovery. And she never liked going to the gym, but now she loves going to the gym and she loves her strength work.
nice.
And then that was a 2.5 minute PR. And she was not expecting that she was ever going to PR again. And here she is, like late 40s, I think. Yeah.
Nice.
So there's a lot of stories like that. Not everybody's going to PR. Like I'm not expecting I'm going to PR, and I'm okay with that. I'm happy with age-related goals. And I have other athletes that can still PR. And then I have others that are just like really working on, I have a few that are now at 1 year injury free. So
Nice.
that's a big goal too, is just consistency. So it's a little different for everybody, but I'm there for it all.
Yeah, I think like the mindset of training age and potential that's on the table when you start to do, like you said, some of the basic things that we probably should have been doing the whole time, but didn't necessarily know about until more recently. Yeah, you don't write off personal bests because they absolutely happen and they do often. Yeah, for clients that I know we both share. It's really cool to see. And I think part of becoming a master's athlete is also accepting that PRs will stop one day because we are all aging right now and you do slow down eventually. And I think having good coping tools and like ways to shift your mindset and support to do that, I think is really helpful because that's hard. I think that's hard to wrap your mind around too, if that's been like the sole focus of why you're doing the sport in the first place.
Definitely. I totally agree. And that's why also, like as soon as you start running and creating goals, that one of those goals should be something that has nothing to do with performance. So that we're just getting used to this idea that our success isn't just based around the outcome of the race. And the outcome of the race, I mean, that's not quite it either, because the outcome of the race could be, one goal is I just gave it my all. I left everything out there. And
That
that
was my
can be
goal.
true. Yeah, that can be true no matter how fast you run. You could have a terrible day and you left it all out there and then you succeeded. And so I think making some of those goals and early on, so that those goals become very important when PRs maybe aren't really an option anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm so inspired by people who do that so well and who just have longevity in the sport. I think that's really impressive. To keep wanting to do it, I think is impressive. So, yeah, I mean, where can people find you and where can people sign up for this group?
They can find me on Instagram. It's Kim Nedeau _training inclined. I also have a website that's traininginclined.com. I can give you my email. Do you want my email?
Put it in there. I'll put it in the show notes too.
Okay. It's kind of funny. It's kim@kimnedeau.com. Yeah, so any of those options work.
Awesome. And the info for Train Like a Master will be in those places for people wanting
Yeah.
to look for that group. Yeah, great group. I mean, I'm biased too. I'm the sports dietitian for the group, so
We
I think
love
it's
having
great.
you there.
Yeah. But no, I think that's why it's a great group is because you do have the aspect of the training plan and
Yes.
training guidance for people that's specific. And you also have these learning topics that may or may not have to do with training. And we've got the nutrition support. I know people talk about, yeah, like hormone replacement therapy resources and other hormone and lab resources, mental health. It's just such a great group that's very holistic and cohesive. So
Thank
yeah,
you, Holly. I appreciate that.
it's not, there's not many like it. I don't know of another one like it. So
I
I
don't
hope,
either. Yeah.
yeah. So I hope if you're in this category or approaching this category, you go check it out if you need that support.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being the best coach and for coming on the pod.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.